The Brexiteers in 2016 were all a flutter, all pounding and beating their chests, going, "Oh my God, we are going to, be wonderful. We're going to be this trading nation again. Isn't it going to be so wonderful? It's going to be all bedrocks and roses. It's going to be fantastic." But of course, as we've said multiple times before, this was pretty much based on some really ridiculous assumptions. The first one, of course, was based on essentially the British Empire and the idea that all the quote former colonies were going to get back in line and somehow come running to us to sign trade deals, which again, they have not. You may remember a couple of years ago, India came out and said, yeah, we're not going to be Britain's imperial bazaar in response to many of those comments. It also, again, relies on the fact that they completely forget about how trade worked with those countries basically being unable to trade with anybody else except the UK. And they basically had to send all their goods and only buy British goods. That is not how normal trade works. That's how a colonial monopoly works, which is what it was. Second of all, this entire thinking is based on free market fundamentalist principles. These are free market fanatics who the Brexiteers who are behind this, the whole idea driven by a libertarian desire for that there should be no governmental interference in any of the markets whatsoever. Even as we've said before, the crazy idea that has been floated around by many of these Brexiteers that we just reduce all our tariff to zero and somehow that solves all these problems. But again, this was tried once again back in that same age, and it only lasted about 6 years before, well, British companies and even British farmers said, hey, we can't take this trade anymore. And thus ended that grand experiment. And so here we are yet again today of the Tories having to face up to the grim realities of the actual numbers in trade and refusing to make up for it. And again, spouting hot air. And as we said before, with the balloon of metaphor of Brexit, they can only keep giving out that hot air for so long before, well, they run out. And the excuses that they trot out will not last forever. When, again, they promised so much to so many of these people during the 2016 referendum campaign. And remember, they are the ones in full power, in control. They've got no one else to blame for their failures except for themselves now. So, as always, before we do go jumping into this, please do remember to hit the like and share button. And of course, down below, there is the subscribe button. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. And of course, there are the links down below from my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. So, on with this. This comes from the Herald with the title of Brexit and Trade. The Tory hot air will not make grim reality float off. Those failing to grasp the permanent nature of the scale of damage to UK exports from trade from the country's European single market exit, a camp which is seemingly including members of the Johnson cabinet, should digest the latest official data. They would also do well to heed the British Chamber of Commerce's warning that trouble with the paperwork needed for exports to the European Union, a requirement which has risen entirely because of Johnson's administration's hard Brexit and the loss of the frictionless trade, is having a major effect. And of course, members of British chambers and other businesses of all sizes operating from a raft of different sectors do not need to be reminded of this dismal reality. However, Boris Johnson and his cabinet almost certainly do. They have proceeded to try and claim that Brexit has been beneficial, and that we have even had the bizarre job title of Minister for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency dreamed up for Jacob Rees-Mogg. The opportunities remain predictably elusive, and damaging from the Brexit follies is sad, ubiquitous, and exporters remain hugely under pressure, and supply chains have even been thrown into more disarray. Companies and consumers have become used to the lack of invariable delays in getting materials and even parts, and higher prices for things that they can get and buy. and businesses across a vast array of sectors have experienced damaging labour and skill shortages, all because of the loss of free movement of people. Overall, UK goods and exports to the EU last year following the country's departure from the European single market were down 11.8% on the 2018 levels at £152.72 billion. And the official figures showed that last month, the Office for National Statistics has this to say: that comparing with 2021 with our most equivalent 2018 data provides comparisons for trade with our most reasonable stable period. The UK goods and exports to the EU in 2019 were 170.73 billion. So in the 2021 figures is nearly £20 billion lower than the total. And of course, seasonally adjusted data published on February by the ONS showed that UK exports to the EU in January, excluding precious metals, were down by £3 billion, or by about 20% on December. And part of this month-on-month fall was attributed to the ONS to changes in data collection methods by the British Chambers, noted that stripping out of this estimate effect, the drop was still around at least £1 billion, or around 7%. That is a big month-on-month fall. And coming back on the very dismal weakness of the 2021 figures for the UK of goods exported to the EU. The Tory Brexiteers, however, are surely giving people the impression that they are sadly out of touch with the realities of the situation. Conservative MP Sir Desmond Swayne, a supporter of Leave Means Leave, the pressure group, declared in Parliament earlier this month that the UK aid to promote trade in Africa by making borders seamless through the digitizing of the administrative protest, and that it is our agenda for trade with the EU at all. Is it monstrous that we are filling in forms? So what did Desmond think leaving the single market and giving up frictionless trade with countries in the world's largest free trade bloc actually meant? If you could wrench yourself out of the world's biggest free trade bloc and just go even further by refusing to accept regulatory alignment, British exceptionalism is not going to mitigate any of the inevitable damage. And the Tory Brexiteers cannot walk away the actual huge effects of Brexit. Hot air is going to make the current reality just float off to be replaced by the one of the Conservatives seemingly hawkier after. Even Mr. Rees-Mogg, meanwhile, declared that last month that he thought the evidence that Brexit had caused trade drops to be few and far between. He also proclaimed, "I think that Brexit is extremely beneficial for the country." To many households and business struggling with the everyday realities of Brexit, this will seem like an utterly or extraordinary tale and take on the situation. And of course, members of the Liberal Democrats at the weekend endorsed a four-stage roadmap to re-establish the UK's future trading relationship with Europe. This proposes, firstly, the immediate action to improve links with our European neighbours. Secondly, advocates for further steps to build the confidence and establish strong relationship with Europe, including seeking cooperation agreements with EU agencies, and returning to Erasmus Plus, and seeking to reach a UK-EU agreement on asylum seekers. The third stage of the deepening trade with Europe, including a negotiating greater access for our world-leading UK food and animal products to the single market, securing deals on sector-specific work, visas, and establishing the mutual recognition for professional qualifications. And fourthly, the Liberal Democrats propose with their roadmap that the official trading relationship between the UK and the EU is deepened, and that the ties of trust and friendship are renewed. The aim should be to place the UK-EU relationship on more of a formal and stable footing by seeking to join the single market. This, of course, makes perfect sense. However, the four-stage roadmap is likely to be no more than a very valiant effort at struggling against a common-sense approach for the UK to restore the friendly and beneficial trading ship and other links with Europe, ties which have been severed and in some cases very severely frayed by others in the Johnson administrations and their actions. And with the Tories currently having a huge majority, there is no prospect of the Liberal Democrats' suggestions of turning into any kind of reality, at least for now. We should bear in mind the Liberal Democrats, by forming a coalition with the then Tory Prime Minister David Cameron back in 2010, did set in place the chain of events which brought about Brexit. Whatever the case for all that, the official data does tell a very different story of Brexit than to that being peddled by the Tory Brexiteers. The OAS noted on Friday that Businesses' Insights and Conditions survey published on February showed at least a 67% of exporters and 72% of importers faced challenges in late January to early February of 2022, with the additional paperwork change in transportation costs and customs duties all leveled at the top being challenges for the traders. It also added that compared to with 46% of exporters and 61% of importers reporting trade challenges in January to February of 2021. And of course, the British Chamber's head of trade policy, William Benn, said it is noteworthy that exports to the EU continue to fall in January this year. And ONS Business Insight and Conditions data match our own, suggesting that more traders are experiencing difficulties with the paperwork on EU exports as 2021 went on, and of course the early part of 2022. This is having a major effect on trade. And of course, the British Chambers urged urgent action as it expressed concerns over the continued weakness of UK exports to the EU. So, what should we take on board of addressing the reality of the situation? The views of businesses and the organizations that represent them, the official statistics on trade and the difficulties being encountered by the exporters and importers. What do we see day by day for ourselves? Or the words and the opinions of Sir Desmond and that of Mr. Rees-Mogg and his fellow cabinet members? Take your pick. Well, that is, again, as we've said before, the real reality of this situation here. And it was always going to be the case of the denial of reality, because again, the Brexiteers sold the spin that it was all going to be wonderful, it was all going to be fantastic, there would be no problems, it would all be sunny lit uplands, we hold all the cards, you may remember. And of course, you may remember one Daniel Hannan saying, the brain of Brexit, saying these infamous line that only a fool would talk of leaving the single market. And yet Daniel Hannan has said that we should have left the single market very quickly after the 2016. So clearly he must be a fool then, as most of the Conservative Brexit MPs certainly are in this case. So as always, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.